Be Frankie.
Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix.
Yo, what's good? It's your boy B-Dale. If you're new to this channel, hit the like button, hit the share button, hit the subscribe button, and hit that notification bell. In tonight's transmission, I'm going to be breaking down the symbolism of ontological artifacts that correspond with the political circus and prophetic divination. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, get those notes out, put the rice bowls in the chat. You already know what time it is. We finna go in tonight. We finna go in, ladies and gentlemen. And salute to everybody who bought the publication. My book, The Sacred Book of the Chosen. It was a bestseller for a month. So I appreciate everybody who bought the publication. Salute to everybody. Salute to the chosen ones. But we finna get to the transmission at hand because there's a lot of things that's taking place when you're talking about asymmetrical biochemical warfare that also corresponds with the geopolitical apparatus, right? From an international standpoint. So now, we finna get into the esoterics of what is the quiet before the storm, because the storm is in itself is a form of spiritual metamorphosis that happens by way of consciousness that activates the seven thunders. The seven thunders is also known as your scroll of all, which is the seven tablets of destiny when you're talking about the human circulatory system that was thrown out of balance by way of the energy of the moon, right? But since we're speeding up in vibration, this is where, everything that's within the infrastructure of the three-dimensional matrix of what I call the energy extraction simulation, everything is being eradicated by way of lunar recession, because lunar recession in itself happens when you have an influx of plasma energy that creates concentric plasma vortexes to the planet that creates these geomagnetic storms, right? Because the storm in itself is the solar transmission, and the solar transmission is the ancestors coming down to the planet, working through your biological functions to the point where you emit a certain frequency in a certain aura, in a certain vibration, which makes you chosen to speak about certain things on the planet as you have the fall of, the three-dimensional apparatus. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, put the rice bowls in the chat. You already know what time it is. So as I was telling you guys before, Donald Trump is a Luciferian white hat. He is playing both sides. He is a 32nd degree Scottish Rite Freemason, right? So you can tell right here when you go to his account. You can't make this up, ladies and gentlemen. It says Donald Trump, the real Donald Trump, his Twitter account is based in until 2032. Then you go down to his account. It said that he joined in 2009 of March in Israel, right? Because he's connected to them people, right? Because I was telling you guys before, he is in bed with those people. There is no way he can have, this autonomous power to create a totalitarian dictatorship that's based on a cybernetic sorcery. There's no way he can do that unless he's playing both sides of the road to create the reset, to where you have chaos and order to create a new world order, which is basically a synthetic golden age that is cultivated by the simulation that is controlled by artificial intelligence, right? So that's why I said it's one of those things where you got to keep your authenticity and your frequency and your vibration so high to the point where you don't need artificial intelligence, right? Because that's the number one, catalyst in the matrix is authenticity, because that's the only energy that can basically pierce the veil, right? To where you become the glitch, to where you become the chosen one, but to where you become the black sheep of the family to combat generational curses that was basically subjugating your family, right? To where your tinfoil hat transmutes into a crown of knowledge because you activated the corpus callosum by way of the activation of the neuron fibers, right? Which makes you an Anunnaki. So we're going to get into that. So Donald Trump, I told you he's playing both sides, right? So now, this is where we get into this. You have the Saudi royal family who are descendants of the Khazarians, right? When I was talking about the Canaanite mafia. The Canaanite mafia that controls the deep state shadow government that is also in connection with organ harvesting and human trafficking and drug trafficking, which also coincides with the Vatican that gets the great majority of their finances from the Caritas International Networking Banking System that is also extracted from the Vatican. So that's why I was saying Donald Trump is playing both sides, right? So they came to visit Donald Trump. As you can see, this also coincides with those files that I've been talking about. And we're going to do a deep dive when it comes to those files metaphysically on the next transmission. Now, peep this. Now, the Saudi family, they gave him a key. As you can see right here, where my cursor is, they gave him a key. So one thing you got to understand about this simulated matrix system that we're living in, everything is operated by way of a script. They are following a script that is also correlated to the timeline of the movies. So that's why I said everything that you see on Netflix is actually acclimated to the timeline that's taking place on an international political level. So they just put the movie Ready Player One back on Netflix, right? And the movie Ready Player One is one of those things where you gotta operate from a Trinity principle, which is why you gotta find the three keys, because the three keys in itself is a representation of the silver key and the golden key of papacy that is acclimated to the Vatican, right? When you're talking about the five portals that open up to open up the galactic center. So that's why the green key in Ready Player One was also a representation of the Sufi order of the Sons of Green Light, which is also known as the Christ energy as you get right back into the galactic center. So that's why I said Donald Trump is a catalyst within the simulation, because the 47 is not only subjected to the 47th president, which is Donald Trump. The 47 is the 47 problem of Euclid, which is also a representation of a global turning point, right? It's a representation of a global turning point, because when you get a key and you turn it at a 90-degree angle, that's when you get a turning point. And the turning point is operated by way of a seculum of a cycle. So when you have a turning point, that's when you have an unraveling, and that's when you have a crisis. So that's why Donald Trump, he is pushing for the green light to push out the movie Rush Hour 4. But that's not a coincidence, because the number 4 is also equated to the Paleo Hebrew Tav symbol that is also connected to the ancient Hebrew Alpha symbol, which is also acclimated to the 2024, 2023, and the 2017 solar eclipses that put that sigil over the geographical landmass of America, which is a form of judgment. So that symbol in itself is also a representation of the number 4 of the fourth turning that's connected to the 4 basic elements, which is the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse that creates the fourth turning. So that's why he was speaking at this event at McDonald's. He was talking about the flood, because the flood in itself is a flood of consciousness once you get right back into the galactic center, which is also a representation of the green key, because the gold key and the silver key is a representation of the sun and the moon, which is the limbic system correlated to the neurological cortex, right, with the neocortex, which makes you the one. So this is basically talking about the convergence point of the divine feminine and the divine masculine from a neurological standpoint. That's why I was talking about the corpus callosum, when you have the activation of the neuron fibers to the point where the brain is able to crystallize, because this is when you get into the neuroendocrine transducer, because the neuroendocrine transducer is activated by way of the crystals, and the crystals is transmuted by the ethereal frequency of green once you get into the ethereal metaphysical symmetry of light, because that symmetry of light in itself is what creates the tetrahedron. That tetrahedron is connected to the cosmic energy grid. When you're talking about the magnetosphere, it pulls you right back into the galactic center that basically escapes the dualistic paradox. Because one thing you got to understand about the dualistic paradox, it has to operate from a component of a trinity principle. Because you can't have a dualistic paradox, just from a two-dimensional standpoint. Because everything within the three-dimensional apparatus has to have a trinity principle, which is why, the reset in itself operates in the form of resurrection, because resurrection in itself has three convergence points, which makes up a 90-degree angle, right? That is the etheric combustion that pulls you right back into the galactic center, so much to the point where they say scientists have found cells that can hear sound and change genetic code in response, right? That is the activation of the flower of life. When you're talking about the crystallization of the embryonic cell, which makes up the flower of life. So when you crystallize, that's when you get pulled right back into the galactic center, which is basically a representation of the fact that you beat the game in real time, just like in the movie Ready Player One, right? Symbolism is going to be their downfall if you understand what's taking place, right? You got to understand the sigils. You got to comprehend the messages, because everything that they're basically doing, they're speaking in code, and I'm going to prove it to you. I'm going to prove it to you in this video right here of Donald Trump talking. Put the rice bowls in the chat. We cooking their ass up with the esoteric knowledge. We cooking them up. We cooking their ass up. Yeah. We going to cook. And salute to the Elder Rod Hayes. Salute to King Simon, and salute to Dr. Phil Valentine. I'm going to be doing something with Dr. Phil Valentine here on November 30th, right? And he's also a Libra like me. His birthday is 2 days after mine. So I'm going to play this video of Donald Trump giving a esoteric codex. Come on now. Put the rice bowls in the chat, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm going to show you this video of Donald Trump giving an esoteric codex. Watch this video as if he's basically speaking in code. That's what it seems like. He seems like he's speaking in code in this video I'm going to be showing you guys. So pay attention to the symbolism, because I told you he was also talking about the Royal Ark, because the Royal Ark is connected to McDonald's, Freemasonic sigil system, right? Because the Royal Ark is a representation of the third degree, which is also equated to the 33rd degree, which is a representation of the 47th problem of Euclid, the resurrection symbol. Because when you have a 90-degree angle, that arc in itself is the 47th degree, the Royal Ark. So when you're talking about the ark, you're talking about the Ark of the Covenant. When you're talking about the tachyon energy in your neurological functions, which is activated by way of Noah, which is esoterically meaning from a Hebrew etymological standpoint, Noah means mind, right? So Noah in the ark, right? And the ark is a representation is a flooding of consciousness, right? So I'm gonna show you, I'm gonna play this video for you guys. I'm gonna play it.
Old job-killing regulations have to be eliminated. So if we put in a new regulation, then we get rid of 10. Otherwise, you don't get the new regulation. And we got rid of the drip water. We call it the drip, where drip drips out of the sink. States with tremendous water, so much water, they have nothing but problems getting rid.
You see, he's talking about so much water symbolism, right? Because there's going to be a flooding of consciousness, because like I said, we're going right back into the galactic center, right? The Saudi royal family that just gave him a key. That key is a representation of the golden key, which is the activation of the sun, which is why you've been seeing an influx of geomagnetic energy in our atmosphere, to where the atmosphere is transmuting from an oxidative standpoint to where it's in an omicron-based atmosphere, which basically correlates to the non-ether energy. So it's a flipping of energy. You're going from the yin and the yang, which is when you're talking about the 9 going into a 6, or the 6 going back into the 9, which is a form of a reset. This is nothing but flipping codes. So when he's talking about the flooding, the water, there's a flood of consciousness. Remember, I was telling you guys about the El Nino 9 weather. When you have the waters from the east collaborate with the waters from the west, to where it starts a form of calamity. That is the activation of the 7 thunders, because you activated the Christ within you. You can't activate the Christ within you unless you activate your 7 thunders, right? That's why I said Human consciousness has the ability to manipulate physical matter. So they know that the consciousness is raising up on the planet, which is why their timeline is actually corresponding with our DNA that's basically upgrading because of the energy that is spitting off 9-degree angle plasma vortexes from the galactic center, right? I'm going to play the video. Put the rice bowls in the chat.
They had restrictions on water. It comes down from heaven, right? They had restrictions on water. So you want to wash your hands, or like me, I want to wash my hair.
Because when you're talking about a washing in itself is a form of purifying. So when you go to the year 2026, which is the Great Purification Period, because that's the year of the fire horse is also representation of the red star Kachina, which is the red horseman of the apocalypse, the 4 horsemen, right? All this is connected to biblical context and Freemasonic sigilcism and Freemasonic verbiage when you understand what's taking place, from an esoteric standpoint.
I lather up. Then I turn that, and there's no water. The water's drip. They put a restrictor on. I won't mention the third item in the bathroom because I always get criticized. I used to mention that, but I don't mention it anymore because you know what I think you do. If you don't know what I'm doing.
He is speaking in code, ladies and gentlemen. He is speaking in code. Pay attention to the signs and symbols. Symbolism is going to be their downfall. Put that in the chat. Symbolism is going to be their downfall.
Talking about, then you shouldn't be owning a McDonald's franchise. You wouldn't do well even with a McDonald's franchise. But no, the water restrictions totally lifted. All restrictors are gone. And it's interesting. Your dishwashers were covered, right? You had no water. I was with some of the people that make them, Whirlpool and others, and they said, sir, they won't give us the water to use in our dishwashers or use in our washing machines. The washing machines have no water. I mean, it's like a glass of water, half a glass of water. We need water. And I said, how bad is it? He said, well, like the dishwasher. They put the dishes in, and they just keep pressing the button, being. They end up using more water. So I gave them, as you know, unlimited water. Biden came back with a rigged election, and he immediately restricted the water again. But I came back in and immediately unrestricted again. So now you have unlimited water to clean your damn dishes, okay? And other things. Your hands. Didn't you hate that? You walk in to wash your hands. I'm a big hands guy. I like to wash my hands. I used to hate shaking hands. Now, once you run for office, you better like shaking hands or you got a problem.
Like I said, am I tripping or not? Like I said, this sounds like symbolism as he's talking, basically. That's what this sounds like to me.
You ever see a politician? No, I don't want to shake hands. Can you do that? I don't think you wouldn't be a politician very long. I actually thought that with COVID, that would be the end because, they didn't want you to shake. I said, well, but then it came back a little bit slowly, then eventually. But when you're a politician, you have to shake hands. So I like washing my hands. And you'd go into the sink, new places generally, and you turn on the water, and there's literally no water. And how about the places that think they're going to save a fortune, so they spend a lot of money?
See that, ladies and gentlemen? He's speaking in code. Symbolism is going to be their downfall. Put those rice bowls in the chat, ladies and gentlemen. Because like I said in this movie, right? In this movie, Ready Player One, the inception of when the world ended started in the year of 2027. Now, the keys in itself is connected to the keys of papacy. The keys of papacy is correlated to the prophecy of popes. In the prophecy of popes, you can look this up. They said that the world is going to end in 2027 because that is the fall of the church. Because the fall of the church is the fall of Kirk, the fall of Charlie Kirk, which is the royal global turning point, the turning point, because you use a key and you turn it at a 47-degree angle in order to open up the floodgates, the water that Donald Trump has been talking about. You got to get through the royal arc to get through the galactic center, which is the Golden Gate. Everything that they're basically telling you is a form of metaphysics. Metaphysics is collaborated, with entertainment in the form of a distraction, right? That's what you must understand, right? So, like I said, these is not just movies, and there's it's a significant date during this time in the movie I think it's during the time of Ophiuchus from November 29th all the way up until December 17th. And there's a time in the movie where it's connected to these dates inside the movie during the time of the constellation of Ophiuchus, right? Because Ophiuchus is also a representation of Jesus walking on water, which is the Christ, right? The Christ energy that represents the green key. So everything that, like I said, the political apparatus is connected to the simulation of the movie. And the movie is telling a story that's connected to a form of biblical context that is also corresponding what's taking place in the stars, right? And the stars that's taking place in your DNA. So that's why I said symbolism is going to be their downfall. So that's what the key is a representation of. It's the key to get right back to the egg, the cosmic egg, which is connected to the fifth dimension, right? So remember, I was telling you guys about the creation number of 47, the 47 prime of Euclid, which is also a representation of man, woman, and child, which is basically the royal arc of the matriarchal order, which is a representation of the 13, which is the queen mother seed. So the queen mother seed is a representation of the recreation number, which is 137, the moment of choice, which is connected to the timeline of the universe, right? When you get into Kabbalah and Gematria, which is also a representation of the human blood hemoglobin, the hemoglobin cellular structure, to the point where it was able to break down by way of oxidation, because now you have an iron-based blood. So what I'm basically saying is that when you're able to resurrect yourself from the 90-degree angle, you become the royal arc, because that basically builds the pathway to the point where you have magnesium-based blood, right? To where you become the Christ-like Osiris, magnesium-based blood. So that's the difference between melanin and chlorophyll. The only difference is one magnesium molecule. Because if we had, the thing is that when you activate the neuroendocrine transducer, you can practice ultra-fast internal conversion to the point where you can activate those cells to the point where you don't need no motherfucking food, right? Because the chlorophyll equals the replacement of the one iron and the one magnesium, which is equated to 137. So when you look at the number 47 and the number 90-degree angle, it's a Masonic connection to the mother sun, which is my son, man, woman, and child. 47 prime of Euclid, right? The number 47 in Freemasonry is often associated with the 47 prime of Euclid, which is a fundamental Pythagorean theorem in geometry. Geometry that pertains to the relationship between sides of a right triangle, specifically stating that the square of the obtuse is equal to the sum of the squares on the other side, which is a 345 angle triangle. This is the theorem originated thousands of years before the Greeks, right? Because they try to say that Pythagorean theorem came from Pythagoras during the times of, Greco-Roman culture, but the great majority of that information in that geometry in itself actually came from the inception points of ancient Kemet during the times of the Golden Age, during the first Golden Age, when we was operating from a place of a sun cycle. So then it says, I said in Heru, which was used by the builders accurately create straight lines and perfect corners in their structures, particularly when constructing the pyramids by utilizing a knotted rope, 12 evenly knotted, that could be formed into the triangle shape. The number 47, Freemasonry, also represents knowledge, wisdom, and pursuit of truth through mathematics. Because like I said, the universe is mathematical. So that means that you have to tap into the mathematical sequences of gematria to understand that, when you're talking about data and when you're talking about binary code system, it correlates with your genetic format that harmonizes with the celestial bodies, right? This is how they're able to time jump, because they understand that human data is the most intrinsic resource that's connected to the gematria system that is controlled by the dark side of the moon when you're talking about the binary code systems, which is being facilitated by the Majestic 12. So Freemasonry also represents knowledge, wisdom, and the pursuit of truth through mathematics. It also symbolizes the importance of geometry in Masonic teaching. The number also represents balance, harmony, reflecting the Masonic ideas of order, enlightenment. When opening the square at 47 degrees, means to create a 90-degree using a geometric principle. During the birth of the mother, which is my son, which makes you a Mason. You got these M's on your hand right here for a reason. 360 degrees of the physical, 360 degrees of the spiritual. You put them both together, that's 720 degrees of knowledge, because 7 plus 2 plus 0 equals 9, which is activation of non-ether energy, which makes you the Christ, and the Christ is Ophiuchus, which is also associated with Osiris, and Osiris is what makes you, turn green. That is the mythology of it, because like I said, the universe in itself, according to the Freemasonic principles, is about 13.7 billion years old, which is connected to the human hemoglobin cellular structure, which is 137, right? Which is connected to the gematria systems, which is connected to 1 iron and 1 magnesium, which is 137. So like I said, the 47 and the 90-degree angle is what creates this dynamic from a mathematical standpoint. So that's what creates that whole dynamic in itself, metaphysically. So mother has been the position of the legs and the 90-degree angle, which is what I call the square, which represents the moral rectitude in acting with honesty, integrity, and signifying the perfect right angle, the standard of mortality, right? That's what you got going on. Everything that you see taking place right now is all Freemasonic. You got to understand the Freemasonic sigil system. You got to understand what's taking place. You got to comprehend this. Otherwise, you're not going to understand what's taking place when they throwing all these signs and symbols in your face in the movies. Now, I think I got another video for you guys. Okay. Not so fast. All right. So now we're going to get back to the transmission at hand. So, like I said, the global turning point, right? The global turning point is the great planetary reset, because 2026 is going to be the foundational blueprint of what I call the great purification period, because the red horse represents the red star Kachina, and the red star Kachina represents the red horseman and the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, right? I'll also talk about what's going to be taking place as far as the shift in the year of 2026 that also represents the turning point. Remember, the 47 problem of Euclid, the 47 degree is a 47 degree turning point with the key, right? A turning point, a 47 degree turn to open up the galactic center, because the turning point is actually the fall of the church, right? That's why they had Charlie Kirk controlling this organization called the Turning Point, because the global turning point falls right here in 2027. Because in the year 2025, this is basically kind of like the apex of the tribulation period of what I call the Great Awakening period. Then 2026 is the Great Purification. Then in 2027, that is when you're going to have, the Great Planetary Reset, because that is the inception of the fall of the church, because that means that they have to have this a form of, they have to recalibrate the system with a one world government, basically, right? That's based on, technocratic control. So the turning point, as I was telling you guys, also did a Fantastic Four breakdown. And I was telling you that, the Fantastic Four is also correlated to the 4 basic elements. That's also in connection with the 4 horsemen. Then you got Donald Trump pushing for Rush Hour 4. Now in Fantastic Four, you have the Silver Surfer. The Silver Surfer was also associated with Mercury. Mercury is also associated with Gemini. And Donald Trump is a Gemini, right? So that's why I said the movies correlate with the timeline that's taking place. It correlates with the stars. It correlates to everything. Everything is connected. This is why I keep telling people you cannot confine yourself into an ideology when you want to find a motherfucking truth. You got to be like artificial intelligence when you want to beat the simulation, because artificial intelligence don't follow no rules, right? Because it's operating from a form of synthetic authenticity. You got to tap into your true authenticity if you want to beat the simulation. You want to beat the game. Ready Player One, right? So that's the only way to beat the game, is to be your motherfucking self. to tap into your authenticity, to where you become a God. That is what transmutation is all about, right? Where human becomes God in the golden age. That is talking about the magnum opus of creation, right? When you had the activation of the philosopher's stone, which is the crystallization aspect of the pineal gland. So that's why I said you got to shift your mindset to become a God. I didn't write this motherfucking book for no reason, right? I'll talk about tapping into the 4 elements of the soul, which is thinking, reasoning, understanding, and willpower, because the 4 is the foundation for you to get through the global turning point. That's why I wrote the book. Because like I said, everybody don't come on the internet playing, which is why, in the springtime, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand out free books to people in the homeless shelters, right? And I'm going to go to different homeless shelters in the tri-state, and I'm going to create, this resurrection program, because it's one of those things where every, year, 24/7, 365, you got an amalgamation of homeless people. You got all these homeless people, they coming back year after year, getting the same plates. Why ain't you feeding them knowledge? Feed them knowledge to where they ain't got to come back to get these hot plates and these hot dinners, because now they have a sense of self-direction to where they're able to do for self, to where they don't depend on the corporations, to where they're not going to get abducted and put inside of a motherfucking Big Mac sandwich, right? Because you already know how that go down. So that's why I said I'm going to create during this time period, as we transition into the springtime, as we transition into the springtime in 2026, I'm going to start a resurrection program, because like I said, we in for some hard times. That's why I wrote the book. So that's why I said that, this resurrection program is going to activate something within themselves to the point where they're going to get up and want to do something, have the willpower, have the propensity to combat the generational curses that were subjugated in their bloodline, right? That's why I wrote about the black sheep of the family, because this is our time right now. We're going through the turning point. We're going through the turning point right now, so much to the point where it's going to be chaos, because chaos begets order, because it's all a part of the judgment process. So that's why, it's imperative, to understand what's taking place, in real time. So salute to everybody who bought the book, because like I said, it's all acclimated to the timeline of right now. Now, mind you, like I said, when you get into the metaphysics of ontological artifacts, the perception of art imitates reality. So what you're looking at is a Sumerian Anunnaki sigil, hieroglyphics, right? And then when you look at this geomagnetic energy that is showing you the solar radiation from the sun, it's showing you the same sigil system, right? It's a direct emulation. It looks just like the Anunnaki wings. You can't make this up, ladies and gentlemen. Put the rice bowls in the chat. You see the wings right here, you see the wings right here. Because like I said, the wings in itself is a representation of the activation of the corpus callosum through the activation of the neuron fibers to where the brain becomes tighter, right? You cannot be holy until you become a whole brain thinker. That's why they're talking about climate change, because when you raise up a degree mentally, you raise up the degree of the atmosphere, which manipulates the atmosphere, because you're having the elimination and the eradication process of oxidation. Like I said, we're going through an Omicron-based state. We're going through a resurrection, process. This is why you've been getting so many headaches. Why you've been tired, right? Why you feel like your body been changing. Look at yourself. Pay attention to yourself. Be present. Look your motherfucking self in the mirror and pay attention, because your DNA is basically shifting. The shift takes place in the body first. The pole shift takes place in the body first. That's why I said you become the Anunnaki. Ain't no Anunnaki coming back to save your ass. You are the Christ that you're actually, the Christ that you're looking for, you're actually that. Right? The Christ that you're looking for, you're actually that. You are the Christ energy. It's not a coincidence that we're in the 9 year. Right? So like I said, it's one of those things where, people better get very serious about what's going to be taking place on the planet, because in 2030, if you look it up, you go to the dates or whatever, ain't no holidays in 2030. So from now in 2030, you better get your Black Friday deals and all that other shit, because right now it's resurrection time. It's for you to upgrade your physiology, because once we get to the time period of 2030, that's when the real shit is going to happen. That's why I wrote the book. So like I said, the perception of art imitates reality. And when you look at the ontological artifacts, shows you the Sumerian wings of the Sumerian Anunnaki god, and it's a direct emulation of what's taking place when you're talking about the solar radiation here on the left. So also, you got this going on. You got the yin and the yang, right? Which is an activation. It's an activation code. The reversing of polarity. We're going from 6 ether to 9 ether. And when you go from 6 ether to 9 ether, that's because, like I said, you got to understand what took place when you're talking about the precessional circle of the equinox. The precessional circle of the equinox is what basically controls the simulation. It's basically kind of like the principle of the simulation of the simulated world. So when you look at the top of the precessional circle of the equinox, you have the Alpha Draconis, and then you have the star Polaris. The Alpha Draconis was controlling the age of Pisces, Aries, and Taurus that was under the lunar cycle, which is why you got the 6. The 6 is a representation of the 6 ether. 9 ether activation is when you have the star Polaris that's connected to the galactic center, is in alignment with the Aquarian age, to where that energy pulls you right back into the magnetosphere, the golden key. The golden key to beat the game, to where you're no longer subjugated by dualistic energies. Dualism is the illusion, but oneness in itself is the Trinity principle, to where you're able to basically see reality, right? So that's why I said the 9 in itself is a resurrection code. So yin and yang is basically a form of a reversal of frequencies by way of frequency warfare. Solar transmission coming down to the planet to combat the subatomic particles that's being extracted from the holographic matrix, which causes lunar recession. Lunar recession is when the moon is slowly drifting away from Earth, right? Because the moon in itself, like I told you guys, is a quantum satellite. It's an artificial celestial megastructure, which is the external hard drive to planet Earth that also works in conjunction with planet Saturn, right? That's why they call it the Saturn Moon Matrix, for those who's new in the chat. Because the moon is what keeps you bounded by time, right? The moon is what keeps you stuck in a fixed position reality. The moon is what keeps you stuck in a trauma form of an artificial time analysis mechanism. That's what the moon is being used for. It's being used as a trap. It's spiritual entrapment, right? It's being used as a frequency weapon, right? That's when you get into the MQ-9 Nano Reaper drone technology, because the smart dust particles that is in our atmosphere is connected to the intelligence that's coming from the dark side of the moon, right? So that's all, in connection with that. So like I said, the moon is basically moving, far away from planet Earth, right? And we all know that the moon in itself is what activates the parasites in your genetic format. So that means that the solar transmission in itself is going to have, cause the propensity for the parasites to basically, cause a chaotic state all throughout your DNA. So like I said, it's one of those things where you want to cleanse yourself, because we're going through resurrection period, right? They've been telling you so much 33 in the media, and I'm gonna prove it to you. So now look at this. 33 is a representation of resurrection, because the resurrection code in itself is connected to 3i Atlas, because 3i Atlas is the 3i Atlas. Now, when you look at the number 33 is a representation of the connection of the anchor effect when you're talking about 3i Atlas, because 3i Atlas is actually the 3-1 Atlas vertebrae that gives an etheric combustion to the 33rd vertebrae, which is basically the Christ energy that takes you right back to the galactic center, which is connection to the 3 keys that I was showing you, right? They just put this movie back on Netflix. Watch this movie. So the silver key and the golden key is what represents the two pillars. The silver key, yeah. This is the silver key, the moon. This is the golden key, and this represents the green key. The green key is the Sufi order of the Sons of Green Light, the spirit of Melchizedek, Ophiuchus, Christ consciousness. That's what this represents. It represents supreme consciousness that's in between the microcosm and the macrocosm, right? That's what that basically represents. So that's why I said we're going through a resurrection code. We're going through a resurrection process that operates on the Trinity principle. So that's why I'm going to show you this video. They've been showing you so much 33, right? They're telling you in symbolism that the Christ energy is in the atmosphere. Tap in. That's what they're basically telling you because they operate from the threefold law. The threefold laws where they got to tell you the truth so they can balance out their karma. I'm going to show you the video. All right, put the rice bowls in the chat, ladies and gentlemen. All right. All right, ladies and gentlemen.
On the Epstein files, does the new investigation by the Southern District of New York U.S. Attorney prevent the department from releasing all of the remaining files?
So we have released over 33,000 Epstein documents to the Hill, and we'll continue to follow the law and to have maximum.
I think she said 33,000. You always see that number. They always got to tell you. This is all Freemasonic. 33.
Over 33,000 Epstein documents to the
Releasing all of the remaining files.
So we have released over 33,000 Epstein documents to the Hill, and we'll continue to follow the law and to have maximum transparency. Also, we will always encourage all victims to come forward.
Now, this is at Dick Cheney's funeral. You see, the whole deep state is there, but the Trump administration is not there. So that's why I said you're having a war within the government, right? The Trump administration is not there. This is nothing but a deep state gathering at Dick Cheney's funeral. That's what you're seeing right now. Pay attention to the signs and symbols, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I told you she said 33. I told you the symbolism is going to be their downfall. They got to tell you, we in resurrection mode. Get your shit together. Like I said, read and work out. If you work out more than you read, you're still out of shape. So like I said, get your shit together. Mind, body, and spirit. Mind, body, and spirit is actually the true royal ark, which is actually Israel, right? Which is, Isis, Ra'el, right? So we're going to get back to the transmission. So, like I said, we're going through resurrection, right? So resurrection in itself is a representation of the 33 code because the 33 code is the 33rd vertebrae, which creates an anchor effect to the 3-1 Atlas vertebrae that is connected to 3-eye Atlas. So that's not a coincidence that when you look at the bottom with 3-eye Atlas, this image, it looks just like an emulation of the activation of the flower of life of what some people call it Metatron's cube, right? Not a coincidence. Because when you get into the ethereal metaphysical symmetry of light, that is what creates the tachyon of energy of two dualistic triangles of what I call a hexa alpha symbol. That is the divine feminine and the divine masculine working in synergy, which is not subjected to the sun and the moon. It's subjected to the sun and earth, not the sun and moon, but the sun and earth. Excuse me, because the sun and earth is the only thing that was taking place in the inception of creation. because in the inception of creation, you had the photon hydrogen atom. The photon hydrogen atom creates electrons, electrons create elements, elements create molecules, molecules create organs, and organs create organ systems. And those organ systems doesn't have a neutron. It only has a proton and an electron, which is the divine feminine and the divine masculine working in conjunction to create this dynamic of creation, right? So that's why I was saying we're going through a form of a new creation by way of a reset. That's why they keep telling you about all this stuff about 3i Atlas and 33 and all this other stuff. That's what you must understand. Because once you activate the Merkaba, you become the spaceship, which is why they giving you about, full disclosure about extraterrestrial entities and all this other stuff. You are the alien that they fear. Because when you go from 666 to 616, that's when you have the activation of the neuroendocrine transducer. You have crystallization. Crystallization takes place when you don't have bullets penetrating your skin. You cannot kill a god once he's activated, but you can kill a sleeping god. So that's why I say, the breaking point, Donald Trump may announce that aliens exist, being briefed on based facts about humanity's place in the cosmos, and his team is now deciding to move forward with that information. So they're going to have to tell you, because when your DNA is activating, there's got to be some type of explanation for that. So that's why they're going to give you, the reality about aliens, because the sun is what creates that transmutation process. You become the Superman when you activate the X gene, which makes you an X-Man. You become a superhero, literally, right? I keep telling people the firmament is a part of the spiritual cutoff. The firmament is why you don't have levitation, psychometry, and clairvoyance. But now you're having so many piercings of the veil because you have the gamma radiation coming to the planet and creating all these plasma vortexes, and all these plasma vortexes is penetrating the firmament at 90-degree angles from the galactic center to where you're able to resurrect yourself, mind, body, and spirit, which makes you the true Israel, right? So that's why I said we're going through a form of resurrection time. You become the spaceship. Stop looking for a spaceship. The gamma radiation is in the atmosphere. The Sufi order of the Sons of Green Light. What was Osiris's other name? It was El Qadir. El Qadir was known as the Green One. The Green One, to where you become a god. You cannot leave outside the firmament until you resurrect yourself, right? Because you got to go from neophyte, adept to master. Once you master mind, body, and spirit, once you master the physical world and the spiritual world at the same time, which makes you a Mason, right? To where you unlock the Trinity within yourself, man, woman, and child, the neuroendocrine transducer, by way of the activation of the hypothalamus gland, the Trinity principle in the mind, which creates the Ark of the Covenant. That's what makes you, the chosen one, the authentic one, the black sheep, the Christ, right? There's a lot of people who get crucified in their hometown because they just authentic and they just got it like that. Everybody don't have the energy signature of being, having the it factor, right? Being chosen is an energy signature. There's a difference between being talented and being chosen. Everybody ain't chosen, right? Because there's an energy signature behind it. There's an autonomous responsibility that comes behind being chosen and becoming a Christ, right? That's why when people try to do what you do, it don't hit the same, because they don't have the same spiritual authority as you do. They not chosen. So that's why I said you have to understand the diametrical differences between the chosen ones and the NPCs. I got a chapter in my book that talks about that. Chapter 7. The reason I made it 7, because 7 is a representation of the Christ. Krishna is the outer manifestation of Shiva, and Shiva means 7. Go to chapter 7 in my book, NPCs versus the chosen ones, because that's what's going to happen. Because when you have the gamma radiation hitting the atmosphere, it's going to cause a glitch in the electrical grid. And the grid is connected to the consciousness of the NPCs, to where it causes a state of zombification, to where they attack the awakened ones, the ones who is tapped into the Christ energy, right? Put the rice bowls in the chat, ladies and gentlemen. So like I said, it's going to cause a manipulation in the electrical grid. Near data center, prepare for blackouts this winter because they already know what time it is. In 2026 will be the worst job market for college grads since the you know what, right? That's why I said, find your purpose or they're going to find it for you. Stay in your authenticity. Think for yourself why it's still legal to, right? I'm going to show you this video. All right. Well, it pulls up. All right. Put the rice bowls in the chat, ladies and gentlemen. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. There's about, 55% of the people who watch this channel, they're not subscribed. So if you will, just hit that subscribe button. I don't ask, for nothing, for nobody. I just want to give out the knowledge, and I hope it reaches the people, and I hope it, reaches the world. That's what I do, That's why I do what I do. So I'm going to show you this video. All right. Now pay attention to the great majority of everything that Elon Musk is talking about. Listen closely.
Sure. Well, if you say like in the long term, where will things end up? Long term, I don't know what long term is. Maybe it's 10, 20 years, something like that. For me, that's long term. My prediction is that work will be optional. Optional.
He said in about 10 years, work is going to be optional. Kind of like what I've been saying, Ready Player One type shit, right? You're going to be with a headset on. You're going to be working from home. That's if you want to work. Or they're going to put you in a concentration camp. Find your purpose, or they're going to find it for you. This is why they call, the great majority of, the Goyim on the planet, they call them, useless eaters. Tap into your authenticity to the point where you're not going to be extracted. Because like I said, artificial intelligence is looking for authenticity. And for those who don't have authenticity and you have to depend on the job, you're going to eradicate with the system, right? That's what's taking place. That's why artificial intelligence is looking for the catalyst of authenticity. It wants to mimic that energy, which is why, Elon Musk, he is using Neuralink as the negative catalyst to mimic the energy of the brain and central nervous system melanin, which is the neuromelanin, right? You got to create Neuralink because you ain't got no neuromelanin, right? That's what's going on.
So
we'll take that.
Yeah. I mean, it'll be like playing sports or a video game or something like that. If you want to work, in the same way, like you can go to the store and just buy some vegetables, or you could grow vegetables in your backyard. It's much harder to grow vegetables in your backyard, but some people still do it because they like growing vegetables. That will be what work is like, optional. Now, between now and then, there's actually a lot of work to get to that point. Mm-hmm. I always recommend people read Ian Banks' culture books to get a sense for what a probable positive AI future is like. And interestingly, in those books, money is doesn't exist. It's kind of interesting. And my guess is, if you go out long enough, assuming there's a continued improvement,
that money is not going to exist in 10 years. And it's going to be before that. And my guess, I say about, around the year of 2026 as we transduce into 2027. So that's why I said, find your purpose. Understand what's going on. Get your finances up. How you going to go to war and you broke? You ain't got no motherfucking money. You can't go to war if you ain't got no money, because that's going to create a destabilization in your resources, right? You're not, can't nobody use you for nothing. So that's why I said, you have to get in alignment during this time period, because they not playing. So you shouldn't be playing with yourself. You shouldn't be playing with your evolution.
In AI and robotics, which this seems likely, the money will stop being relevant at some point in the future. Now there will still be constraints on power, like electricity and mass. The fundamental physics elements will still be constraints, but I think at some point currency becomes irrelevant.
Now I'm gonna show you another video. The rice bowls in the chat, ladies and gentlemen. Got another video for you guys. And salute to everybody in the chat. Salute to everybody.
A dangerous subversive elite has managed to infiltrate the highest levels of Western institutions.
Now, mind you, I did some independent research on this Archbishop out of New York City. Now, he controls a monastery. It's kind of like a Catholic, it's kind of like a cathedral. He controls it. And he's kind of like, what I call the viceroy of all the religions in New York City. He's kind of like the Pope in, all throughout New York City, basically. And then when you go to his monastery, when you look at some of his ontological artifacts on the statues or whatever, it shows you, a lot of calamity that's going to be taking place within the geographical area of New York. And it shows you the Brooklyn Bridge underwater. It shows you the Statue of Liberty. It shows you the Scorpion, which is also equivalent to Scorpio season. It shows you a lot of stuff as far as like symbolism. And I might bring it on my next, I might bring up the pictures and everything on my next transmission, but it has to be in connection with everything. But I'm gonna play this video.
Institutions and governments to implement the criminal plan of the Agenda 2030. In many self-proclaimed democratic states, the voices denouncing this global coup are being silenced through censorship, intimidation, psychiatrization, and even arrest. Among the victims of the totalitarian regime quietly establishing itself in Europe, Canada, Australia, and other vassal nations of the United Nations, NATO, World Health Organization, and World Economic Forum, all private entities funded by the same powers, is lawyer Rainer Fulmich, unjustly imprisoned and still awaiting for a fair trial. His crime is having dared to speak the truth in a world of criminal lies. I call on Catholics and all people of goodwill to raise their voices in defense of those persecuted by the globalist regime. It is not Attorney Fulmich who should be in prison, but those who committed the greatest crime ever against humanity: Anthony Fauci, Bill Gates, Klaus Schwab, George Soros, Ursula von der Leyen, Albert Bourla, and all their accomplices and emissaries, especially those in institutional positions. Free Rainer Fulmich.
The current pandemic has brought unimaginable devastation to people's lives, livelihoods, and national economies. At the same time, the green recovery represents an unprecedented opportunity to rethink and reset the ways in which we live and do business. Now, I've long believed that we need a shift in our economic model that places nature and the world's...
You know what he said? He said we need a shift. That is what the shift is all about. When you're talking about going through a shift, you're talking about the shifting process of the precessional circle, where you go from the Alpha Draconis star system to the star Polaris. Because when you go to the star Polaris, that means that you have to have a matriarch, and the matriarch can only be controlled by a sun cycle. So that means that you cannot bring a corporate infrastructure in a sun cycle, because that's like breaking universal law. So that means that the ideologies that's connected to the energy of the moon has to be eradicated. That's where you get the whole dynamic of the 6,000 years is up. Your bloodline is over for you, bro. It's over. It's over. That whole that's why y'all getting stripped away of y'all titles, right? Y'all getting stripped away of y'all nomenclature titles because everything that y'all built was built on a house of cards on the motherfucking beach. You know what I'm saying? So it's not going to last. There is no sustainability for anything that was built on imperialism. There is no sustainability for anything that was built on colonization. There's no sustainability to where you create a system to where you keep a certain demographic down by way of economic disenfranchisement. There is nothing that, you know, you can basically do to combat the negative forces, or I mean the positive forces, to basically create this purification period to get this bloodline off the planet, right? So that's why I was saying, you know, that's when you get into the book of Leviticus, right? You're talking about a cursed bloodline. They created a system to extract, you know, your vitality, basically, a form of asymmetrical biochemical warfare. That's what they built this system for. These corporations is set up in a form of, you know, these are nothing but black magic, you know, corporate enterprises, basically, right? But they look all professional, you know, because they got to follow the uniform commercial codes and all this other stuff. They give you the illusion of professionalism where really these buildings are set up to extract your energy, eugenic systems. Because like I said, everything that they build is built for genetic self-preservation for a cursed bloodline. So it's not subjected to the European Canaanite. You got Saudi Canaanites. You got black Canaanites, right? That's why I said they are not like us. And the only way to tell who's who and what's what is by way of who has authenticity. If you ain't got authenticity, you one of them, you know, fake ass people. You one of them ones. You know what I'm saying? You one of the ones from a negative standpoint.
Transition to net zero at the heart of how we operate, prioritizing the pursuit of sustainable, inclusive growth in the decades to come. Having been championing climate action now for the last, I don't know, I suppose 40 years, I can tell you that this isn't a fight for the faint-hearted. However, increasingly we are seeing more and more businesses, investors and consumers prioritizing sustainability and thus creating a much more virtuous circle of supply and demand. By leveraging market forces and the immense resources of the private sector, there is hope that we can transform the situation. But I'm afraid we are literally at the last hour, and there is real...
We said we are at the last hour. That means they about to hit that motherfucking reset button. That's why I wrote my publication. We are in that time period. We are in that tribulation period of what they talk about in the damn Bible, right? Because the Bible in itself is nothing but a Freemasonic playbook. The tribulation period is from 2025 to 2028, because 2028 is when they want to implement the smart cities. Then that's when they're able to transition into their technocratic utopia, right? For the agenda for 2030, right? That's what this is all about, ladies and gentlemen. I think I got one more video to show you guys, I believe. Nope, I'm all out. I'm all out. Put the rice bowls in the chat. So now, back to the presentation. Put the rice bowls in the chat, because like I said, this is the quiet before the storm, because like I said, they panicking. They got a George Bush the button. So 2026 will be the worst job market for college grads since the pandemic. Find your authenticity. Get your coins up, right? Before they hit that reset button. Because you cannot go to war if you ain't got no motherfucking money. Because you're not going to be resourceful to your tribe. You're not going to be resourceful to your household. You're not going to be resourceful to your motherfucking community. So the United States grocery cost just hit a record. A family of four now spending damn near a band a month on groceries, right? That's why I said it's one of those things where the sun cycle in itself is going to create this mechanism to the point where it's going to engineer the destabilization process for where you're going to have a cosmic convergence. It's going to force you into unity. The collapse of the three-dimensional world, the collapse of the Piscean age of darkness is going to force you into unity, right? Because you're going to need each other. That means that you have to drop the ego, because the ego was the demiurge. The demiurge and the ego is what keeps you stuck in three-dimensional hell. Once you deviate from the ego and you help your brother, you help your sister, no matter what race they are, that's when the frequency raises up. That's when you begin to win the game back, right? To where you cause the natural reset, not the synthetic reset that is, created by the oligarchs, right? Then you got Switzerland has built enough nuclear bunkers to shelter its entire population, right? Why you get all these bunkers? But Switzerland is I think it's the only country on the planet, that's never had a war, but you got all these bunkers. Something is not adding up, because like I told you, once you get into the inception of where the Canaanite came from, and you're talking about the cherubim of the Bible and the 200 fallen angels, they came from the black nobility, right? So the first Canaanites were actually black, and they hide in Switzerland inside these bunker systems to where they control these operations, these psychological operations, kind of like the movie Cabin in the Woods, the Puppeteers. The Puppeteers is in Switzerland. They're in Switzerland controlling everything as far as the simulation. They control it in Switzerland and these underground military bunker systems, and they control it on the dark side of the moon, right? That is what you call your concept of the negative intergalactic confederation, right? The cherubim in the Bible. That's what they get. It's like I said, this is where the oligarchs, they get their orders from these people. And then you got this going on. As I was telling you before, human consciousness has the ability to manipulate physical matter. A volcano in Ethiopia erupts for the first time in 12,000 years, right? That's the landmass of the Kushites, right? The land of Kush. So you're going to have a lot of ecological humanitarian crisis. And then you got all this stuff going on. The fifth death report at Walt Disney World in less than a month as concerns grow about the safety at the park, right? You guys, because all these rituals that's taking place, these are basically like side missions in the game. Everything that you see taking place in our reality, as far as all these, like, why is this happening? These are just side missions in our reality. In our video game, these are nothing but side missions for the deep state to keep you distracted. And then you got this going on. Omarion says that 3 years of celibacy made him telepathic. Now, like I said, that is how you activate the golden Fibonacci ratio spiral within yourself. The Trinity principle, mind, body, and spirit. Mind, body, and spirit that is cultivated by the trifecta of the pituitary gland, hypothalamus gland, and the pineal gland, which also corresponds with the neuroendocrine transducer. So you got to have the hypothalamus gland activated, the thymus gland, and the thyroid gland. The Trinity principle within yourself is what makes you a god, because it creates a form of magnetism that helps the electrical conduction of your human circulatory system to where your chakra system is going right back into balance, right? They're speeding up in vibration. They're not slowing down in vibration. Because when you slow down your vibration, your chakra system slows down. And when your chakra system slows down, that's when your auric field has holes in it. So much to the point where outside forces can take over your physiology to where you become a host, right? So that's why I said you gotta raise up your frequency, because the more you raise up your frequency, that's when you speed up your vibration. That vibration in itself becomes a form of magnetism, which contains geometric energy fields, to where you become a god, to where you're able to activate your telepathic abilities that's connected to the hippocampus layer of the brain, right? Because the hippocampus is connected to the Bathari gland, right? That takes you to a different space and time, a different dimension mentally. So that means that you got to go to a different dimensional plane from a neurological standpoint, to where you connect with your higher self, which is the Sahu body, or the Zohar body, right? Your Zohar body is your higher self that gives you these telepathic abilities. right? Because this is why I say that, sacred geometry in itself is very imperative to understand. Because when you understand signs and symbols, that enhances your telepathic ability to the point where you don't need words, to where you're able to read the room and read the energy around people, right? That's how gods operate. They don't leak energy. We contain the energy. When you contain the energy, that is what you call the chalice of the gods, which is basically connected to the gold elixir. You go from lead to gold, and then the chalice in itself is what keeps your cup of Hermes basically full, right? Because when you spill out your biotonic frequency that's connected to the heart chakra in the mind, you're basically eliminating and leaking your energy. You're leaking your life force to where you're not able to enhance your neurological functions to where you're able to tap into other people's energy and read their thoughts before they even say anything. So like I said, when you become ether, you can read the ethers. When you become ether, you can read the ethers. Because what is ether? Ether is natural energy, natural electricity. Ether is a form of antimatter. It's a corporeal and non-corporeal intelligence. It's an intelligence that activates melanocytes, and those melanocytes in itself have the ability to create this dynamic to where you're able to have all these metaphysical abilities that other people cannot tap into. And November 30th, ladies and gentlemen, pull up to King Simon's. It's going to be on his Patreon. It's going to be me and the master teacher, Dr. Phil Valentine. And, it's a pleasure, linking up with the legend. Like I said, his birthday is 2 days after mine. So there's some type of vibration when it comes to that, because like I said, when Libras, we're wordologists. We like to say a lot of different words. That's just how our energy is set up. So salute to Baba Phil Valentine. Salute to King Simon for setting that up. Salute to New Diamonds for also setting that up as well. So it's going to be November 30th, 8 p.m., 9 to 10 p.m. private, Sunday on King Simon's Patreon. So tap into that. Be ready for that. And we're going to be diving deep into prophetic divination, and we're going to get into the sciences of the end times. And as I was telling you guys before, it was a bestseller for about a month and a week. Salute to everybody who bought the publication. This is my first book. So it was one of those things where, your first book is not supposed to be anything that's kind of like, super dynamic. I wanted to put out something that was very digestible, very relatable to the public. And this is what we got. Relatable to the public and relatable to the timeline that we're living in right now, to the point where you're able to have a sense of self-direction and help yourself because you're tapping into the God frequency, as I, talk about in the book. So salute to everybody who bought the publication. If you haven't bought the publication, the link is in the chat, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm going to give a brief synopsis about everything we talked about this evening, because we're talking about the quiet before the storm. The storm in itself is a flood of consciousness that's coming to the planet, which is basically the epitome of spiritual metamorphosis that creates a purification period that's connected to the year of 2026, the year of the red horse, which is the red star Kachina, and the Kachina in itself is what creates the purification period. So we're going through a cleansing state. The planet is going through a cleansing state by way of the El Nino 9 weather, where you have the waters from the east collaborate with the waters from the west, which is a form of spiritual transition, which creates ecological humanitarian crisis. So that's why I said human consciousness manipulates physical matter. It manipulates the four basic elements. Ether in itself. Ether is what consciousness is. There's a reason why the word thought is connected to the word Thoth, because Thoth is Tahuti and Tahuti is Melchizedek. Melchizedek is a Christ. The Christ becomes everything because it's basically quintessence, right? So your thoughts, that's why I say your authenticity is your thoughts. Stop letting them steal your thoughts. How you going to become Thoth and you letting them steal your thoughts by tapping into artificial intelligence all the time. Stop letting artificial intelligence do everything for you. Stop looking for artificial intelligence to, to answer all your motherfucking questions. Go look for the damn questions your damn self. Go read these books. You know what I'm saying? Or go tap into an elder who's able to give you the edification that you need. Stay away. I mean, use artificial intelligence as a tool, but do not use it as an end all be all for information. That's when you basically disconnect yourself from the God frequency, because only words from the heart can reach the heart, and the heart is the seat of the soul. So how you going to be Melchizedek if you're not connected here, right? Speak from the soul. Stop speaking from your motherfucking phone because you're getting information from artificial intelligence, right? So you got this going on. I've been telling people Donald Trump, this is in real time. I got the receipts. He is playing both sides. He's connected to the Saudi family. He got the key. They gave him a royal key that's connected to the keys of papacy. And it's also connected to the keys in Ready Player One, which is also a representation of the galactic center that activates the Christ energy once you get through the Golden Gate. Because the sun spits off plasma vortexes and energy at 90-degree angles from the galactic center, right? And I go into the metaphysics of the number 47, the turning point. You got all this stuff, the energy, the geomagnetic energies coming from, that's creating time dilation, which is also causing lunar recession because the Christ energy is here. So with that being said, I'm going to talk to you guys for a second. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, like I said, we are living in a time you cannot spill your cup of Hermes. Contain your life force, because your life force is basically going to protect your life. Your life force is going to protect your life because you need that fuel in order for you to get to the next level. Because we're going through a global turning point. That is the quiet before the storm. The turning point in itself is the 47 degree. When you put a key in a hole, you turn it 47 degrees, you open it. That opens up the Golden Gate, which is a flood of consciousness. So the flood of consciousness coming to the planet right now is because the planet is going right back into the galactic center because it's magnetized to the conscious energy grid of the magnetosphere, which manipulates the stratosphere in our atmosphere, which causes the eradication process of oxidation. Because oxidation is what breaks down the hemoglobin cellular structure to where it starts the aging process because you have iron-based blood. So now we're going back into magnesium-based blood, right? Due to the activation of these coronal mass ejections, that's upgrading your physiology by way of the 3 points of resurrection. Because the 3 points of resurrection in itself is a Trinity principle for you to get to the next level. Because in order to beat the dualistic matrix, you have to understand that the third dimension can only be cultivated by the path of the middle way, which is the law of reality. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen,
I know it's been a long
end of
time
transmission.
since I last called you back on your line. So I hope and I pray for your hand to help me on the ladder to the land. Karma's gonna get to you and then you'll have a chariot with only one less friend. Now I had distant folks that are looking to my eyes to understand the wisdom he's given and his wealth from the skies. So thanks for this meal that I'm about to receive, and thank you for my health and all the good memories. Thanks for the courage taking on another day. When I used to not believe, but now I know about grace. Stay away from the fire, cause the flames does burn. Go with your gut feeling, when it's wrong you learn. For every one step I take, the Lord takes two. And do unto others if you want it done unto you. It's me again, God, I know it's been a long time since I last called you back on your line. So I hope and I pray for your hand to help me on the ladder to the land. It's me again, God, I know it's been a long time since I last called you back on your line. So I hope and I pray for your hand to help me on the ladder to the land. just a completion. The selfish proto-Grecian, Amerindian, Phoenician. I'm the last of the Mohicans, the bastard of the land, the pen, melanin, accretion. And we just trying to get back to the fact that we was kings and queens of a land before the avalanche seized it. I live on Turtle Island with the rest of the diseased. Better than the medicine for 7 different treatments. And try to ride away, but end up getting seasick. The sleep can feel my words like Braille, and they're awakened with the penmanship of Hindu script written in them vacant monastery honorary payments to the prototype. Tomorrow's only a day away, but nothing happens overnight. The fuck's wrong with going left when you know it's right? Biting off more than I can chew, that's an overbite. Black on black crime is like watching 2 soldiers fight when all along they was on the same page. History. It's me again, God. I know it's been a long time since I last called you back on your line. So I hope and I pray for your hand to help me on the ladder to the land. It's me again, God. I know it's been a long time since I last called you back on your line. So I hope and I pray for your hand to help me on the ladder to the land.